You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise security coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 50. They said it couldn't be done. SharedSecurity.net is 50 episodes old today.
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast. This is episode number 50. We need a fanfare. Da-da-da-da-da. So, and as you can see, we're all dressed appropriately for the very ceremonious occasion. And we've got our usual cast of characters. I'm Scott Wright, the Streetwise security coach, here with Tom Eston, and our usually here in spirit but never actually on the line, Kevin Johnson. So we'll maybe make up some words that he might say, and as we go along.
Well, I'll speak on his behalf.
There you go. Yeah, and then we have a new voice, our roving reporter, Alex. Introduce yourself, Alex.
Hi, it's Alex Hammerstone. I'm currently in the car on my Bluetooth, so I apologize for any background noise.
The noise is not bad, and we've got all kinds of different sound effects happening this week, so that's not a problem.
All right.
And so as we mentioned, we're having our 50th episode. I think we started this podcast in 2009. Is that right, Tom?
That is right. It's been a journey.
It has. Lots of fun times. We're going to do this a little less formally than normal. We'll still do an agenda and cover our topics, but it's kind of fun to just sort of reminisce a little bit at this point. And do you remember what the podcast was like back in 2009, Tom?
It was very chaotic, just because 2009 was a very chaotic time, I think, for all of us. And I think for the security industry, too. I mean, this is when social media was just starting to get very popular, right?
Yep.
Twitter just came out in 2008, and
I think Facebook had at least 200 million people on it.
Yeah, they weren't even in the billions yet.
Yeah, and I think the topics that we covered focused a lot on Facebook, and a lot of those discussions, I think, were around technical vulnerabilities and hacks and all kinds of interesting things that we don't talk so much about anymore, not because they're not possible or not happening, but I think so much of the attention now seems to focus on privacy and social engineering, some of the softer aspects of security.
Exactly. And you know what? I think I went back and looked at some of the old show notes, and I actually saw MySpace being mentioned a few times.
What's that?
So if that gives you some historical reference, MySpace was still kind of a site that everybody used. So
yeah.
So are you that Tom?
Am I that Tom?
Yeah,
No,
are you that Tom or not?
I'm not that Tom, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that kind of money.
and on another note, like podcasting was, it had started to work, or become popular, but I don't know that it's ever become, a craze, call it, but it was well established. But we've been doing this for quite a while now, and podcasts come and go, but it's kind of nice that we've been able to keep going.
Yeah, there was this podcast that I used to do called Security Justice, which was one of the big popular podcasts back in the day. Alex remembers.
I certainly do. I used to like to come out and listen to you record that. So
yeah, you used to do it in a bar, didn't you?
We did. We did it in an Irish pub.
Yeah. Well, we've come a long way.
Yes, we have. Now I'm in my basement.
All right. Well, we do have some interesting topics to talk about, and we welcome Alex's opinion on any of these things. Feel free to jump in anytime, Alex. It's always good to hear another perspective on these things. So our agenda this week, what are we going to cover, Tom?
So we're going to start with just talk about a really good article from Brian Krebs. So if you haven't read any of Brian Krebs' blog posts, he was a reporter one time for the Washington Post. He's kind of made a name for himself as being, kind of the front of the line reporter on malware and information security and crime and all of that. And he talks about how lazy authentication is still the norm. So we're gonna. I think his story that he shared a personal story about let's just say a struggle with a certain provider that he had and how his account was hacked. And I think it's some good lessons learned for all of us. Kind of what he talked about.
That'll be fun. There are hints of other past stories, lessons not learned kind of thing in that one, which will be fun to talk about. What else do we have?
Then we will get into why those Facebook quizzes are causing issues in regards to your privacy. So we're going to talk about some things that hopefully will make you think twice before clicking on those quizzes that your friends share almost on a daily basis.
Excellent. Good to have some strong Facebook content in this one.
Yeah.
Just to keep it representative.
We're keeping it real. That's
absolutely.
Right.
Now, we also have one on pre-crime arriving in the UK. Is that something like in Minority Report in the movie?
It is. In fact, the article had a screenshot of one of the precogs. If you've watched that movie with Tom Cruise,
not recently, but yeah, I'll have to go back and look at it.
It's a good movie, but I mean, it's a good movie to kind of see just how some. I think there was another article I read that talked about how some of the things in that movie have started to come to realization, to our time.
Yeah.
Science fiction predicts the future, right? Kind of thing.
Yep.
But this case, this is a little creepy in terms of, all the surveillance cameras that are just all over the place. In fact, in the UK, I think has the largest amount of surveillance cameras out of any country.
Right.
And how now they're starting to, use these cameras that, stores and banks and other companies are using these cameras and can actually detect somebody walking through the door. And if you're on one of these watch lists, you may be escorted out without any questions asked. You haven't even committed a crime, but just because you're on this list, because of your photograph, showing up in one of these cameras, it has some interesting privacy ramifications.
Yep. So that'll be a fun one to talk about. I'm sure we can come up with some interesting comments on that. And, of course, we always have to have the creepy side of the Internet of Things, or at least anything scary and, alarming to people we have to talk about. So,
well, not scary yet, but, pretty soon your TVs are going to be able to, watch and listen to every move that you make and be able to send you ads and fun things.
We'll have to have some kind of a meter, like an analog needle that sort of sweeps across for each story. So we can say creepy up to scary up to whatever, right? We can gauge our stories on this meter. So.
Is that like the Homeland Security threat indicator in the United States?
Yes.
It's like a temperature gauge. That worked out well for them.
Yeah.
So.
Let's go back to the drawing board.
Right.
And finally, Xfinity security flaw. It's interesting because I just set up hired a home security company. And I was asking them some interesting security questions, and they're going, "Oh, nobody ever asked these things." But Xfinity had some issues, did they?
Yeah, this is a good topic because a lot of people now are purchasing, home alarm systems that are self-installed and they're all wireless. So Xfinity makes one of those systems, and some security researchers at a company called Rapid7 found some flaws in the wireless protocols and showed how easy that these systems are to hack. And so I thought it'd be good to bring up because these types of systems, Xfinity is just one vendor, but there's a lot of different vendors that have this type of system, and just some things that people should be aware of, especially when we're talking about physical security and protecting your home.
Excellent. Well, that's a nice palette of topics to talk about. And wondering, Alex, did you have any topics in mind this week anything that comes to mind about recent security news that we might want to add to our little agenda?
Yeah, I was pretty satisfied with the show list that you sent out, so I think those are all very good topics.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning and get started and look at Brian Krebs' article on lazy authentication.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to do was it'd be great, Alex. I don't know if our audience knows about your background and where you work at. If you want to just give a quick kind of 1-minute overview of who is Alex Hammerstone.
Absolutely. So I work at Trusted Tech. I am in charge of the GRC function. So we do a lot of program evaluation, program development, et cetera. I'm actually a QSA, so I take that as you will. But I get to work with some pretty great people and see some really great things. So.
Awesome. And just to make sure that we cover I won't say the IQ level of our listeners, but I think we need to make sure that everybody understands what the acronyms we use are. So the GRC acronym is Governance, Risk, and Compliance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. So that's becoming a big thing I hear in enterprises these days.
It is. So I think that it's a great way to take a look at not just identifying security issues, but helping look at ways to kind of fix them, such that you can fix things or mitigate them to the extent possible.
Yep. And the QSA title is related to auditing, right?
That's correct. So it's qualified security assessor for the payment card industry.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, so that certainly qualifies him, if nothing else does, to comment on this show. So, excellent. So, let's dive in then, Tom.
Yeah. So this Brian Krebs article, it's called 2016 Reality: Lazy Authentication is Still the Norm. And so he talks a lot about how his PayPal account was hacked. And it wasn't hacked through, a typical way of, getting his credentials or a phishing attack or anything like that. How his account was hacked was this hacker called up PayPal and used publicly available information, including he found, I guess, Brian's social security number, date of birth, phone number, things like that. That, with a little bit of research and reconnaissance and things like that, somebody can find that out about you. And he was able to reset Brian's password all through a phone call, and all even bypassing Brian's two-factor authentication that he had on his PayPal account. So I don't know if you're familiar with PayPal and eBay, but they do have these tokens, hard tokens that you can get. And you can use them to secure your account, just like banks and other businesses are coming out with those, which is a great thing, right? And you would think, well, I got two-factor authentication on my account. There's no way a hacker is going to be able to get into my PayPal account. And he just talks about the struggle that he had of how easy it is for somebody just to call up or pretend they're Brian Krebs and get his password reset.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, and it's certainly not the first time this kind of an attack has been made. If you remember Mark Honan, right, from the Wired magazine, he had his whole digital life basically erased by somebody who was able to do this kind of sort of false authentication into his, I think it was his iCloud account.
Yep.
And it's so silly, that companies are not spending a little bit more effort on that side of the authentication equation.
That's right. And, I had another good example in my previous role when I was working at Secure State. We hacked into that celebrities, accounts.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
iTunes accounts. Yeah. So the guy from Super Troopers, the movie. And that was an eye-opening experience all through telephone social engineering, starting with Amazon. And all Amazon asked was, what was the last, purchase, or it was name one purchase you made in the last 6 months. And just based off of items on his wish list, his public wish list, it was one of them was Game of Thrones season 1 DVD. And that happened to be the one item, and it allowed us to gain access to his account that way.
Yeah,
and especially if you review any items, it's all there too. What you bought is all publicly available if you're reviewing things.
Exactly.
And I think in the Matt Honan one, it was the fact that Amazon treats those last 4 digits as not really being secret, the last 4 digits of your Visa card or your credit card, whereas Apple treats them as a shared secret. So you go to one account and you can get the information, go to the other account, and use it to authenticate.
Right. So this is kind of an eye opener. Thinking about how we rely on third parties to protect our information, and it's not always as straightforward in terms of how you think your account may have been compromised or your credit card been breached or any of that. A lot of times it comes down to a simple phone call and some social engineering, and it's hard to defend against.
Yeah,
very
and
hard.
It's actually not even easy to test. I mean, there are now more and more auditors who are doing social engineering audits. I actually did one a year or so ago, but it's tough as a person who works in the security field. You're trying to get to the truth, essentially, and do things that are right. And when you're calling up someone's customer service line and pretending to be somebody else, it just doesn't. It's not an easy thing to do. And so there aren't that many people who can successfully do social engineering tests. But the bad guys are getting pretty good at it.
Yeah. Some of the things that I liked how he summarized at the end of the article. What could have PayPal? What could they do? And what can a company do to better validate people through the phone? And I like the idea of any phone that they have on record, like a mobile phone. They should just send you like a text message, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of like the out of band 2-factor authentication that you see a lot of sites using, like Twitter and such.
Yep.
Validate that you're really talking to the person that who they say they are, by using technology, and then there's not a lot of companies are doing that because it's kind of the call center mentality, right? That's still the old school, and just we haven't adapted these newer threats, especially around social engineering.
But it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it could easily be done technically, I think, and I think it goes along with it's one of the major tenets of of security in general, right? Is to have layered security. So if you can't prevent an attack, you should at least have something in place that can detect it. So if you're able to send out a SMS message to a phone that is on record, at least you'll be able to detect if somebody's been attempting to make that kind of a change.
Exactly. So we'll see where this goes, but definitely an eye opener. Something to think about if you've often wondered, how did my account get hacked?
Does that kind of authentication check happen in the PCI world, Alex? When you're
as far as requirements?
Yeah, in terms of checking to make sure that people have secure methods for resetting or whatever it is, getting through customer service requests.
Well, so as far as the requirements, it definitely deals with internally. So how you're handling your internal validation and verification for resets. But as far as how you're verifying customer identity, it's less concerned with that.
That's interesting. You would think that might be something they'd like to have in the standard as well.
Well, I think one of the things that really concerns me in general with the information is how little control we as consumers have over it.
Yeah.
You can select who you work with. You can choose not to work with certain retailers that you don't feel like they're, protecting your information in the way you might like. But it's really, as a consumer who's not in the space, it's really difficult to know who's doing what and what they should be doing. And so we really rely very heavily on the people that provide services to manage our data well, and in a lot of cases they just don't seem to be.
Yep, sadly.
Yep, I know. I just had that recently happen to me. I had my credit card was compromised, and this is something I go through probably once a year, unfortunately, because all the breaches. And I think this one was because of the Hyatt breach that happened. Hyatt Hotels had a very large breach they just announced about a month ago, and I stayed at Hyatt's last year, so
yeah, I mean,
kind of makes sense.
Everybody's going to get a year of free credit monitoring eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think last year I had 3 different debit cards between Home Depot, Target, and one other. But it's funny that you mentioned the Hyatt because I was actually out to dinner on, I forget what day it was. I think it may have been Sunday night or Monday night, and my card was declined, which is always embarrassing because I was, out with a lady. And of course, you get the fraud alert message on your phone, and I called, and starting right after the last time I was at a Hyatt, I started having all these charges I didn't recognize. So obviously those got reversed, but so you and I are in the same boat. So.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The adventure continues.
All right. Well, I think we beat number 1 to death.
Yeah.
Lazy
Let's
authentication.
Let's talk about Facebook quizzes.
Yeah, that's fun.
Why those are bad.
Oh, okay. It's not fun.
So, everyone with a Facebook account has probably noticed all these quizzes that come by your feed from your friends. A lot of these are personality tests, friend comparisons, year in review, all these things, and they're all done by third parties, right? The article that we'll link in the show notes, goes in a little more detail about this and specifically calls out one company, Meow or something, or Mao, I think they're called. MEAWW is the name of this ad company. Meow, right? And they talk about some of their quizzes, and it digs into their privacy policy and what they really do. And when you click on these links to take the quiz, they automatically now these are all Facebook applications that are developed, and because they're Facebook applications, what they do is they'll prompt you and say, by taking this quiz, you're giving access to your email, your friends lists, anything that you've made public. And all that information is then harvested by this third-party developer, and they clearly state in their privacy policy that, well, when you click on that link, you thereby give us this information by taking the quiz. And who knows what happens to that data after that? A lot of times, from some of the research I've done, especially if they have your email address, you're probably going to see an uptick in spam. Mm-hmm. They have your name, they have your friends' names. I mean, think about all that information that can be used, all because you wanted to have a little fun with your friends and, do some silly comparison, right?
Yeah, and I think it goes a long way to similar to what we talked about in our last podcast, where we had the idea of the sucker list, where if you are doing searches on certain web search engines, the results of those searches sometimes end up in the hands of companies or organizations that are going to use it to try and sort out the suckers, the people who are likely to want to respond in certain areas, a lot of times because of their emotional sort of response to stories. So if you get somebody into a quiz where they have really strong opinions, I can see that getting people being put into a sucker list kind of thing.
Well, I want to plead guilty here, too, that I have taken 2 of them recently. And I will say, like, my IQ was shown to be 89, and I'm in the most posts with Dave Kennedy. So.
Well, that puts you in the sucker list, I guess.
Sure does.
But you had fun while doing it, so.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny to see now. I'm really aware of anything that people post on Facebook. In my feed, there's certain little keywords or things that it's just not worth clicking on.
But that's a good point. Alex has a good point. I mean, it's coming down to risk acceptance, right? I mean, if you're okay sharing that information, then that's okay. But I think it's just something everybody needs to be aware of, that not all is what it seems, especially with, things that, in Facebook especially, that look convincing and look fun, and, just need to know what happens kind of in the and
it just sort of takes us a little bit further down the road of exercising a little bit more care. It used to be I would always avoid doing or accepting invitations on Facebook to play games or to run apps and things like that. Now it's really just doing the quizzes, right? So similar idea, but a little less obvious, but still potentially risky.
I think, and for me, I'm not really protective of my email address. Because I use Gmail, and they're pretty good about filtering out the spam. But I think my mantra, especially when working with customers, is that we can't tell you what to do, or not to do something, but we want to make sure that you understand the risk of doing it, so that at least you're informed and making a choice there. Yep. So if you want to take quizzes, that's great. Just make sure that you understand the risk there and accept it, with the knowledge of what could happen.
Absolutely. So anybody listening to the podcast now is aware of those risks. Please spread them around. Not the risks, but the knowledge.
Don't spread risks.
All right. Well, this is the next one I'm really interested in is the pre-crime in the UK, making sure that your face stays off the crowdsourced watch list.
Yeah, I found this fascinating. It was interesting because when I used to work at a big bank here in Cleveland, and I know that we had this technology. This is like 10, 12 years ago, where, you know, for banking customers, they could scan somebody's face and they can see if, you know, they've been convicted of check fraud or if they're on a certain type of watch list, right? Because they've, you know, tried to cash bad checks or, you know, things like that. But that was really closely tied to the financial industry. And it was a very kind of small, you know, community, where this article talks about, you know, all the cameras that are installed, say in, you know, the United Kingdom, where there's approximately 6 million closed circuit TVs everywhere, right? They're monitoring the streets, they're monitoring stores, and how that information now through some new technology is being used to match people up on watch lists. So not, you know, terrorists or theft or anything. And what does that mean for you, know, the normal person? Because we all know technology is not perfect. And what if you look like somebody that may be on one of these watch lists? What happens then?
So this article was from Ars Technica, right? And so in general, what are the kinds of things that people could see themselves being sort of isolated from in that kind of scenario?
I think it's the scenario of you're walking into a store that has this facial recognition technology, and you look like somebody on a watch list.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
You come up. Yeah. What happens in that case?
I just wondered because
or what if you?
The topic said something about staying off the crowdsourced watch list. So it almost
Right.
suggested to me like anybody can put you on the list if they think you're a
Sure.
bad person. Almost like the old the People app that we were talking about a few episodes ago that kind of has faded away or burned out or something. But the idea that people can just comment or rate individuals or put them on watch lists in this case arbitrarily.
That's
Well,
right.
It kind of reminds me of credit reports too. Is that you know so that you have certain entities that are able to report things to the credit reporting, you know, the credit bureaus, who are then able to share that with other, you know, entities. So obviously the ones that are sharing, I mean, I can't go in there as an individual citizen and, you know, put something derogatory on someone else's credit. But if you know, but obviously if I'm a bank or I'm a lender, et cetera, then it's a different story.
Yeah,
So you know, and
those
with the reports,
those
you see a ton of
businesses, though,
errors,
they'll
too.
be held a little bit accountable, right? They will probably be taken off of the access to that list if they abuse the privilege. But from a public point of view, it's a little bit scary because there's really no standard that people are being held to.
Absolutely. The other thing I would worry about is, you know, with any technology, you know, there's the accessibility to it, and so many of these types of things were so expensive and, you know, cost prohibitive in the past. But as they become cheaper, you know, so will nightclubs start having a, you know, preferred facial recognition list of, you know, certain people they don't want in there, et cetera, et cetera. Where are these things going to start to be used as they become very cheap and readily available?
Yeah, it's really interesting because if you turn it around, a business is using that to manage their risks, to try and keep the wrong kind of people out of their business.
But you
Isn't
also
that
might
crazy?
think that it would be a great service or a great source for, you know, retailers, so that you have someone that spends a lot of money in your store comes in and it could automatically alert, you know, an employee to go over and greet them and kind of guide them through, or somebody that comes into a hotel, you know, so when you walk into a hotel, it'd be great that they could greet you by name and that kind of thing. So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there might be positive applications as well.
And that really is right out of a scene from Minority Report, right, where Tom Cruise is walking through a mall and these ads are talking to him as he walks by them. On the wall, there's the posters talking to him because they recognize his face.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that was just a couple of years ago. There was a startup company out of Nashville, I believe, that had that Face Deals application, And so a bar could install this facial recognition camera at the entrance. And then if you wanted to participate in this deals program, you can sign up through their Facebook page, and it'll install a Facebook application to take your picture. And it will match your picture up every time you come into the bar, and then text you a discount code for free food, free drinks, by recognizing your face and then matching up that you have their Facebook app installed.
Mm-hmm. And all the benefits that come from having your face in their database.
That's right. No one would ever want to breach anything like that. So, yeah.
Very cool, sort of.
Yeah. So
I think one more thing that's a little bit terrifying about that also, though, is that, if someone takes your credit card number, you can get a new one. But if someone gets your, something that you are, if they get they steal your facial records or your fingerprints, et cetera, you can't really change those.
Absolutely.
You're kind of stuck.
Yep. And we did a little bit of a highlighted section on that a few podcasts ago on fingerprint, the weaknesses in fingerprint authentication, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, next thing you know, you'll be like Tom Cruise, and you'll be cutting your eyes out and putting new ones in.
Yeah, putting the new ones in is a little harder these days, but maybe someday.
Oh,
well.
I hope we don't have to go there.
Yes. Well, now that we've got that off our chest.
Yes. So what's so creepy about the Internet of Things and smart homes, besides the obvious?
Yeah, well, I'd say the obvious. Well, what do we got happening there these days?
I just thought this was a good summary of. We've mentioned a few of these in previous podcasts. The new issues with the smart TVs, and how like Vizio TVs, like my TV that I recently bought, can actually it sends your viewing habits right to Vizio, and then sends that to ad agencies in preparation for somehow sending you ads in the future while you're watching TV. Those smart advertisements, the voice recognition technology that we have in Xbox One, and all the the new Apple TV. It's becoming more popular, and thinking about the privacy around that and how that information is secured. How is it transmitted? Can it be intercepted? There's just so many ways that this new technology can be manipulated, and it just seems to be a nonstop conversation that I keep hearing about in the news.
Yeah, to me it's like an extension of the original loyalty programs, the air miles and the frequent flyers, and you're giving up a bit of your privacy to get some discounts on other products, but now you're getting cool features on appliances and things in return for giving up a bit of privacy and information that you're exposing as you use it.
And the fact that all of these things have security vulnerabilities, and companies just haven't taken the time to do proper security testing or security hardening of these products. I thought it was fascinating in this article, and one of the reasons I wanted to put it in the show notes was about, there was a Microsoft survey done that said that 99.6% of people would gladly accept cash in exchange for having their activities tracked. And the article goes on to mention what happens to those people that give it up through unwillingly, right? Through like a security vulnerability in the TV that they bought. So it's something to think about. And we freely give away information, sometimes for money, sometimes for not. And where does that take us in the future?
Yeah, it's a bit of a gray area too. It sort of goes back to one of the other comments we had earlier in this podcast about, you're accepting the risk a little bit, if you're interacting with these kinds of devices, same as doing the Facebook quizzes.
And I will say that I know that of some people that are manufacturing IoT devices, are having them security check and are having consultants come in and look at stuff. Obviously the privacy is a big concern, but one of the things I was thinking about also is not just the privacy data, but if you were to, for example, access my thermostat, it's 9 degrees here in Ohio, so my air conditioning unit is covered for the winter, with a big cover. So if you were to turn on my AC right now, you would burn it out, and cost me a few $1,000s. So there's also that type of thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of other ways to look at it too, right? There's can somebody take your furnace hostage? I mean, those kinds of vulnerabilities haven't been found yet, but who knows? On one of the future versions or updates, it may be possible to take over somebody's furnace and ask them to pay a ransom to release it. But there's, there between that and other types of, weaponizing people's devices. We talked about webcams being used to launch botnets and things like that one or two shows ago. But the bottom line is people are not, when they're designing and building these products, even if they have a view to security, they don't always look at it from the point of view of what's the worst thing that somebody might try to do this with this device.
Exactly. And it's just going to be interesting to see, to Alex's point, there are companies that are taking a stand and are starting to have, people review these products for security issues. And I think that's a good thing. But there is a large majority of new products that just always seem right now to be the center of attention. And I'm hoping those vendors will catch up and take
it's always going to. I think it's always going to be a compromise or a trade-off because as you get into the smaller and smaller devices, the cost price points are going down. There's a lot less sort of room for profit, especially in areas where there's competition, and so they're trying to make these things as cheaply as possible. And first things to go are the ability to update software, for example, and even some of their security testing. So, the companies are taking risks themselves with it.
Exactly. We'll see what happens.
Yes, and we'll be here to talk about them.
That's right. So let's finish things up with the Xfinity security system flaws and your home security system.
Yeah. So, how often, do we turn on our security system that we've paid for, right? Maybe not as often as we should.
Hopefully all the time.
Hopefully all the time. Up here in Canada, most of us don't. But no, I'm just kidding.
So safe up in Canada.
Yeah.
There's no crime in Canada. Come on.
Well, we don't have any. No, let's not go there.
Well, it's funny for me because I went from, I live in a village of 4,000 people. And I went from not locking my door to now I have cameras and I always have the security system on. But that was basically due to something very specific that happened. So, one thing to point out with this situation is that, we can be pretty sure that, a cable company is not manufacturing their own devices. So, it's probably a good chance that, whoever's manufacturing these for them is also doing it for someone else and other companies.
Really good.
So the vulnerabilities would likely be present in anything that, whatever company's white boxing them. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny because when I asked my security company's salesperson, I said, "So you're planning to use wireless sensors?" "Oh yeah, we've done thousands of them, and okay, well, how resistant are they to being hacked or jammed, And so jamming is a big problem, right? If you can jam it, then it's not going to be able to report when the sensor should be reporting.
And that was, the kind of the crux of the vulnerability that these researchers discovered in the Xfinity system. Again, they're all wireless sensors, so window sensors on your door, or window sensors on the window, door sensors, those types of things can all be intercepted and basically jammed with, off-the-shelf equipment. There's instructions on the internet on how to build 2.4 gigahertz, radio jammers, and that's really all it took, which would basically render the alarm system useless. And to add even more damage to it, most people, when they get a security system, you put that nice sign out in the front of your yard that says, "Hey, I have Xfinity's wireless security system.
Can you say
guys
enumeration?"
Right, go somewhere else. Don't attack my house." Now you're kind of opening up the door of if there's a known vulnerability. And again, I'll go back to, crime statistics. I've talked to police officers in the past and, that I know personally. And, they always say that, home robberies are usually a crime of opportunity where they see a door or window that's open. they're not professional thieves by any means. It's usually a smash and grab type of thing. And, usually most thieves aren't at the professional level where they're creating jammers and other types of things. However, I mean, that doesn't discount the threat, right? Especially if you're advertising that I have a vulnerable system in my yard.
Yes, yeah, it's true.
They
can make them more secure. I'm surprised. I didn't see anything in the details of this article, but I mean, you could have all the sensors having a heartbeat, right? So that if you don't hear from it in a certain period of time, you at least do a trouble or something to indicate there's a problem. So that I mean, there's always ways to work around that sort of thing, but that's going to add a little bit of cost. One thing that I saw that was interesting in my system is that there are a lot of pending notifications. So if you're about to do something, like if you are setting the alarm or whatever, it'll say, how does it work? I think it's on if you have a delay on one of your sensors.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as it's triggered, it sends a pending thing saying, in 30 seconds, I'm either going to expect to go full alarm or be turned off. And so that's kind of a neat way to sort of predict whether or not you should have an event as well.
Exactly. So it'll be interesting to see if these vendors, address the issue. I think the article and the researchers, definitely are working with these vendors, and it's not just Xfinity. There's a lot of different vendors now that offer, like you said, Scott, that are offering what's the same wireless technology. And to Alex's point, a lot of this stuff is probably white boxed, right? And there's probably not a lot of, I'll say, Chinese vendors, right, that manufacture this equipment. So
probably not. No, yeah, we're all safe.
Well, it's all made in China.
Actually, this makes me think of another thing that I came across too. Living in Canada, we've got Bell Canada, who's one of the main phone companies and ISP providers. So they provide internet to a lot of Canadian households. They had a vulnerability that you may have actually heard about in the news. I think it was in DSL Reports a month or two ago with what they're called their Home Hub router. Where their Wi-Fi router, that I would never trust a Wi-Fi router from an ISP anyway, but basically it had a really, really weak, even weaker than had previously been thought, WPS setup. It actually had fixed code for every device, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pin code.
Nice.
And that became public. And what was interesting is, as they came to install one in my house, I asked the technician, so what about this vulnerability? They go, huh? They had no idea. I said, there's no statement from Bell about it, or that it's going to get updated or anything. Nope, couldn't find it anywhere on their website. So it's kind of sad that companies aren't taking that a little more seriously too, because that could be across more than one ISP as well.
I would say look at the bright side, though. At least they're using 7 characters. Could have been 4.
Is that a glass half full or glass empty?
That's a glass, a quart, like an eighth full.
Mostly empty, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Thought I'd get that one in. Some Canadian content. Good. All right. Well, I think that covers a lot of good stuff. And it was funny. We were scouring the ends of the earth for special features and people to talk to, as we neared our 50th episode. And one of the people we wanted to try to reach was the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. We've spoken to people from there before on things like Facebook, rulings and things like that. And so we did put in a request for them. They didn't get back to us in time, but I just saw a note today from them saying, yeah, let's talk. So hopefully in another episode, maybe our next one, we'll have an opportunity to speak to them.
It's the government. They're busy. You know that.
I'm not going there. Government's a big client of mine.
Hey, we won't talk about the government in the United States. So
no, that's right.
We have our own problems.
Yeah, people with top secret access that are on their home servers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, everybody's got their issues, right? So
that's right.
Excellent. Well, it's been a fun episode. It's been a fun 50 episodes, Tom.
Yeah, I think so. This was awesome.
And thanks very much, Alex, for joining us on the call.
Oh, thanks for having me. What an honor to be on your 50th podcast.
Yeah, it'll be indelible there forever now in the podcast archives.
We'll have 50 more.
Yeah, so I wonder how long it'll take us to get another 50. Hopefully, it won't take as long. We went for long periods. we were in no way, we had no predictable frequency on our publishing of episodes, but somehow we got here.
Yep, and we're more frequent now. It's all that matters.
Yes, yeah. So we're going to keep going, and we welcome anybody's comments, questions, criticisms, suggestions. So we're available at feedback@sharedsecurity.net. And if you want to call and leave a voicemail, you can call us at 613-693-0997. And so let's do a quick roundtable on anything anybody wants to say, upcoming events, comments, concerns, school plays, things like that.
No, I'll be just busy doing things at Veracode. I will be out at InfoSec World. That's the next conference I'll be at in end of March.
Okay.
So we'll have to get you out there, Scott, one of these days.
Fun. That would be fun. I'm hoping in the next year. I always say that, but we'll celebrate when I do, when we actually get to meet in person, as Tom and I have not yet. So.
It's all virtual.
I wonder if there's any other podcast in which people have done 50 episodes and have never met in person.
It's a good question.
We might have set a Guinness record.
I don't know about Guinness, but I'll have to figure that out, because I know a lot of other podcasters. I know like the guys from Paul.com.
Yep.
They frequently meet. But I don't know. Good question.
Funny, I'll have to figure out a way to authenticate you when we actually do meet in person. But
that's a good point.
I can vouch for Tom. We have had many lunches together.
Yes, we have.
In our long history.
In full disclosure, Alex and I used to work together a long time ago. So.
All right. Well, that's why we know there's a connection here.
That's right.
He's not just some random guy we pulled off a street.
No.
Well, it depends what context, right?
All right. Well, we should let these good people go, and we'll start saving up for our next episode. So thanks very much, Alex, Tom, and thanks everybody for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you.